Shows Philip Seymour Hoffman as Joe King in a white gown, laying in a bed in a small room in an insane asylum. Denitra Vance, as a nurse, opens a latch metal door and says, "Mr. King." Hoffman, "It's Juris Dr. King." Vance, "Sure it is. Anyway, you have to come with me. It's time for group therapy." Hoffman, "No, doll, you don't get it, okay? I'm not insane. I'm just an alter ego who hears voices. Would you have put Joan of Arc in a crazy house?" Vance, "Joni happens to be one of the more veteran members of your group, as you will see." Michael Clark Duncan and Patrick Swayze enter the room with a wheelchair and tie Hoffman down onto it. Cuts to a room with several people sitting in chairs in a circle, with Hoffman wheeled in and unstrapped. Shows Phil Hartman in a lab coat, sitting among the people in the circle, who says, "Welcome, Juris Dr. King, to our weekly group sessions. I'm Dr. Brainman." Hartman gets up, walks around the circle of chairs, and says, "Now, for those who don't know, Juris Dr. King was in the middle of a trial for criminal infringement, which is not actually a real charge, but his public defender failed to object. Nonetheless, after sexually harassing a prosecutor while he was being cross-examined, Juris Dr. King was found unfit to stand trial and was ordered to stay here at Sane Brains Mental Asylum. So, in order to make him feel more comfortable, Duncan and Swayze approach Hartman and tase him before injecting him with shots and tying him to a wheelchair and wheeling him away. Shows Louise Fletcher as Nurse Ratchet sitting among the circle, who says, "My apologies to the rest of the group," as Philip was acting out his delusion of being a doctor again. "Next week, be sure to tell him how much that hurts your ability to get help from the rest of the group. Welcome, Mr. King." Hoffman, "It's Juris Dr. King." Fletcher, "Now, Mr. King, Philip happened to be correct in his acting out about what brought you here. Isn't that correct?" Hoffman, "Well, Judge Code did find me unfit, but it was an incorrect decision, okay? I'm not crazy. I just hear voices." Shows Joan of Arc sitting in the circle, who says, "I've been telling them the same thing for years." Fletcher, "Why don't you sit down and meet the rest of the group? Why don't you all introduce yourselves to Mr. King?" Shows Ken Kesey in the group, who says, "Hi, my name's Ken. I participated in government studies involving hallucinogenic drugs, and now I find myself in a bastardized version of one of my novels." Hoffman, "That's what you get for trusting the government." Shows William Redfield, who says, "Hello, I'm Dale, and my repressed homosexual urges fail to please my wife." Hoffman, "Is that why she won't stop calling?" Shows Sidney Lassick as Charlie, who is nervously looking down. Fletcher, "Say hi, Charlie." Lassick, "Hi, Charlie." Shows William Sampson, who blankly stares at Hoffman. Fletcher, "And this is Chief. He's a mute." Hoffman, "How?" Shows Brian Rich dressed in a bear outfit with a sack tied around his waist, which Rich begins to play with. Fletcher, "And finally, our second mute, Masturbating Bear." Hoffman, "Does he ever climax, or does he just pitter-patter with the sack?" Fletcher, "Now that Mr. King has been introduced to everyone, let's continue with our session. Now, when we last left off, we were speaking to Mr. Harding. And, Mr. Harding, you've stated on more than one occasion that you suspected your wife had seen other men, correct?" Redfield, "Oh, yeah, I suspect her." Fletcher, "Maybe you can tell us why you suspect her." Redfield, "Well, I can only speculate as to the reasons why." Fletcher, "Have you ever speculated, Mr. Harding, that perhaps you're impatient with your wife because she doesn't meet your mental requirements?" Redfield, "Perhaps, but the only thing I can really speculate on, Nurse Ratchet, is the very existence of my life, with or without my wife. In terms of the human relationships, the juxtaposition of one person to another, the form, the content." Hoffman, "Why don't you knock off the bullshit and get to the point?" Redfield, This is the point. This is the point. It's not bullshit. I'm not just talking about my wife. I'm talking about my life. I can't seem to get that through to you. Hoffman, I just got here. Redfield, I'm not just talking about one person. I'm talking about everybody. I'm talking about form. I'm talking about content. I'm talking about interrelationships. I'm talking about God, the devil, hell, heaven. Do you understand finally? Hoffman, someone get this guy a sedative. Lassick, you just don't want to learn anything. You don't want to listen to anybody. He's got intelligence. Hoffman turns his head, stares at Fletcher and says, Yeah. Anyway, what's a patient like me got to do to get a sponge bath from a feisty little harlot like you, Nurse Ratchet? Shows masturbating bear become excited and shake around the sack he's wearing. Fletcher, you can let me give you a lobotomy. Hoffman, you can do whatever you want to my top head if you take good care of my bottom head. Fletcher, the only thing I do down there is perform castration. Masturbating bear becomes more excited and flies off his chair, knocking into Hoffman, who then falls onto Fletcher. Fletcher begins to choke Hoffman around the neck. Samson gets up, pulls out a sink connected to the floor, throws it through a window, and jumps out and escapes. Masturbating bear approaches the window, turns around and says, Dead from the earth, we're not alive. It's Saturday Not Alive, starring John Belushi, Chris Farley, Bill Hoffman, Jan Hooks, Norm MacDonald, Gilda Radner, Denitra Vance, and many other special deceased contributors. Musical guest, Coolio, and your host, Heath Ledger. Everybody, Heath Ledger. Applause, applause, applause. Ledger. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I lived a very blessed life, getting the opportunity to perform in many great films, including 10 Things I Hate About You, The Patriot, A Knight's Tale, Monsters Ball, Lords of Dogtown, Brokeback Mountain, Candy, I'm Not There, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, and The Dark Knight, where I posthumously won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Applause, applause, applause. Former NFL tight end Gavin Escobar and actor Robert Cormier come up from behind Ledger and put a sack over his head. They then tie him up in a chair and remove the sack. Bill Plant comes out and says, We are getting word that moments ago the Joker, who has inflicted terror upon Gotham City, has been captured by recently deceased bounty hunters paid for by Bruce Wayne. And completely unrelated to Bruce Wayne's capture of the Joker, we understand Batman will be making an appearance. Adam West, dressed as Batman, comes out. Applause, applause, applause. Plant. Batman, now that Bruce Wayne has had the Joker captured, how do you plan to respond? West. Step aside, Plant. I'm going to get medieval on his ass. Ledger. Mr. West, it's Heath. We had dinner last week. You know I'm not really the Joker, right? West lifts Ledger out of the chair so that they're standing face to face and says, I'll tell you what. The truth is, sometimes I miss you so much, I can hardly stand it. Ledger, like I said, we saw each other last week, Adam. West, God, I wish I knew how to quit you. West begins to kiss Ledger. Plant, what a development we have here. While we expected Batman to get vengeance on the Joker, he has instead decided to lampoon another Heath Ledger movie, and the two men are now passionately kissing. West unties Ledger. Ledger, thank you, Adam. You're really a fantastic actor. West, actor? Ledger, folks, we have a great show tonight. Coolio is here. So, as you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, take a look at your life and realize you should have some fun living in a gangster's paradise. We'll be right back.